Faith, hope, and courage. Welcome to Liberty X Happy Hour. Whoa. Welcome to Liberty X Happy Hour. Listen with faith, hope and courage rising up. Listen with faith, hope and courage rise up. Don't get too comfortable or uncensored, unafraid, unplugged. Chromatic run and the room shakes. Distortion swells and the room shakes. For the awake, not the woke. Uncensored, unafraid. Uncensored, unafraid. Faith, hope, and courage. Faith, hope, and courage. Welcome to Liberty X Happy Hour. Welcome to Liberty X Happy Hour. Hosted by Iron Fido. Land tonight, we're going deep, we're going deep.
Dr. Stan Wrigley.
Oh, yeah.
Warm and low, warm and low. Breathe, let it live. Jerry Garcia flow. And the groove comes back. Liberty X Happy Hour.
All right, guys, get down in quote pose. Let's quote pose to space.
Happy Hour.
Oh, my, everybody, welcome. We are now, believe it or not, on episode 12, where we're continuing to bring you guys faith, purpose, hope, and courage by sharing the stories of our great guests and learning more about the person behind the accounts here on X. So really, guys, today is no exception. I'm really, really excited to welcome Dr. Wrigley back. He came on Liberty X many moons ago, well over a year ago, when we were still in our infancy and doing AI graphics and things like that in its early stages. So, Dr. Wrigley, really quick, we'd like to welcome you here tonight. It's been a while. Last time we talked about brutal minds, and this time we're going to talk about DEI exposed.
Well, it's fantastic to be here back on the show. Good to hear and be with you guys, and hope to have a great conversation.
Yeah, thanks. And just really quick to start off the show, guys, the folks that come up and ask Mr. Wrigley, Dr. Wrigley, the best question, the hosts are going to pick two people out. We're going to connect you with Dr. Wrigley, and he's going to send you a free copy of his book, DEI Exposed, if you want to read it. So really quick, sir, if you don't mind, for the audience that may not know you, I just wanted to briefly introduce you. Before we kind of kick things off. So Dr. Stan Wrigley, he is a clinical professor of management at Drexel University's LeBeau College of Business. Man, that's a mouthful. And interestingly enough, he's also a former U.S. Army military intelligence officer who served in West Berlin during the Cold War. So in my opinion, he's one of the clearest and most courageous voices in higher ed. I also work in higher ed, for those of you that don't know. It's a little different in university versus community college, but he and I both share this in common in what we're experiencing in higher ed, and that's really what we're going to talk about. But I think this book really takes it to the next level compared to Brutal Minds, which focused on what it looked like in the university and what it looked like in student services, and how these student services folks have really kind of co-opted the university, right? And we kind of warned parents back in then, but this one is next level receipts, and we're really exposing it here. So it's this capture of higher education. I think Dr. Wrigley is, in my opinion, has become a huge defender of truth, of meritocracy, which is super important, and what we call in higher ed something called academic freedom, letting the faculty teach the course without all of these externalities that we deal with. And I deal with it all the time. So that's through his book, DEI Exposed. Again, sir, we're really, really honored to have you here, and sort of to set the tone of tonight. Really quick, I wanted to start with something, introduce my co-host, and then Land will have our first question for you guys. So, back in 1984, President Reagan, he was quoted as saying, "Free men and women are not destined to be powerless victims of some capricious historical tide, and free men and women are themselves the driving force of history." This truth directly highlights the topic we're talking about tonight. Dr. Wrigley, you call this virtuous victimhood. I've seen it in the podcast. I read it in the book. I read your book in its entirety, just like the last one. And really, you're kind of unmasking that. So that's the topic of tonight, guys. So just kind of put your head in that mindset. That's what we're talking about tonight. But really quick, before we begin the show, I want to give a quick shout out to Fido. And Land, my amazing co-host who keeps showing up week after week after week, including a week I couldn't make it. Thanks for sticking with this wild ride, guys. Fido, Land, I'm having a ton of fun with you guys. And I just want to kind of kick it over to you guys. Fido, he's a retired Navy commander, fighter pilot, happens to be my best friend in real life, and Land is our brilliant graphics wizard. She has all kinds of hot political takes. So you guys, please take a moment, follow our host, both of our co-hosts today. We're having some technical issues. Normally Lands up there with Fido. And please follow Dr. Stan Wrigley. We made that very easy for you. Right up in the title, you see his handle. You can just tap it and you can give him a quick follow. And then we will welcome you up for questions when we get to that portion. So really quick, turn it over to Fido, Land, and then Land, you've got the first question.
Yeah, absolutely. Welcome. Thank you for the great introduction. Like you said, I'm a 20-year Navy veteran, as we were talking about earlier. So lots to talk about and lots that affects the things that I care about in the world. I have a 10-year-old daughter in elementary school here in Fairfax County. So very much this is applicable to us, as we will talk about here. So I'll turn over to Land.
Thanks, Fido. So I'm Land of Illusion. My name is Kira. I came on social media to try to debunk all of the lies and point out all of the craziness that's been happening in our world. And I'm really excited to talk to Dr. Wrigley tonight. So, Dr. Wrigley, Tom gave us a great info, but I'd really like to start where we usually do on Liberty X, which is getting to know the person behind the account. And you have such an interesting background as a former U.S. Army military intelligence officer and now a clinical full professor at Drexel. Can you tell us a little bit about you, your family, your life as a professor, and what pushed you to write the books, especially what we're going to talk about, the DEI Exposed, which is the focus of tonight's conversation? And can you describe, and where you describe DEI as the greatest con of our time, which I agree with you 1,000%.
Well, yeah, I teach at Drexel University. Many years ago, I got my undergraduate degree at UNC Chapel Hill, a graduate degree, PhD at Duke University in international relations, international security. And I served in the U.S. military for 8 years. I was a military intelligence officer, a linguist, served in West Berlin when it was West Berlin against the listening at a listening post, listening to our Glavny Vrag, or the main enemy, the Soviet Union at the time. I also served again at a second tour in Germany, working with an air defense unit. I have worked in the nonprofit sector. I've made about 20 trips to Russia. I did actually visit the Soviet Union back in 1988, so I can really track the changes going on. I've been serving in academia now for almost 20 years, first at Temple University, teaching international business, and now at Drexel University. I've taught overseas in Russia, 4 years in China, communist China, going back and forth, teaching intensive courses to their MBAs. In 10 years in India, I've taught in Colombia, and in Singapore. So this kind of levens my perspective on world affairs, and I can really compare DEI here at home with what I see abroad. So that brings us up to here. And you asked me why I wrote this book, why I wrote Brutal Minds, my previous book. Well, I wanted to write a definitive resource for DEI that would enable anyone who referenced the book. I wanted to write the definitive reference on DEI to destroy arguments of the con men and con women of DEI, and to identify the DEI con game at their own or their university, kids' universities, and finally to arm college students, I guess, with the weapons to recognize and take down what I consider fake faculty and the functionaries who run these workshops on the campus. I'll tell you what really motivated me was the fact that DEI is a classic con game that psychologists have called virtuous victimhood. It actually has a name. That's in the literature of psychology, of social psychology. And it is a resource extraction strategy that's being used in our universities and in corporate America. It's motivated by the dark triad personality characteristics of narcissism and Machiavellianism and psychopathy. And this is a manipulative strategy that combines claims of suffering with high moral virtue to gain sympathy, resources, or social advantages. These are the DEI people. And it's a tactic that's frequently used by people with these dark triad traits, which really is disturbing when you think about it. These folks engage in victim signaling, which is the public and intentional expression of, I guess, one's disadvantages, suffering, that kind of thing. And they combine this with virtue signaling. It's a strategic manipulation of non-victims, you and me, to elicit a transfer of resources from say the university or the corporation to the victim signaler. So I was really surprised at the sophisticated background in psychology that the DEI scam or con has really perpetrated on our nation's campuses. It's metastasized into a $12 billion a year industry, probably more than that now, although we've seen a wane of interest in DEI, at least superficially, since the Trump administration came on board and made a very bold and, I think, righteous attempt to put a quietus on this. So that in a nutshell is why I wrote the book. And I would tell people, if you want to become a DEI expert, someone who's, onto the grifters and the swindlers, both in the university and in corporate America, I think this book shows you how to do it.
Thank you. I love that. And I think the background helps people understand why you're looking at this issue the way you are. And I cannot wait to dig further into it. I think Fido or Tom, I'm sorry, Iron, sorry, has the next question. I'm so sorry.
No, Fido's got
Yeah,
our
I got
next one, but Stan and I, we could talk rounds about this, honestly, because I know exactly what he's talking about. We live, breathe, and eat it, whether it be the syllabus statement, whether it be our curriculum. They're literally in every corner of higher education and in our work and what the accrediting bodies hold us to. So we'll have some questions about that later, but go ahead, Fido.
I want to apologize to everyone for not doing a land acknowledgement before I started tonight.
No, that's amazing. So far, it's been a great conversation. But so all this whole thing, like reading through the book, the things we always talked about, the whole virtuous victimhood, and that's
Right.
multiple places throughout your book. And that really this whole thing just boils down to resource extraction and trying to get people to pay for something that they don't need to pay for. And I was shocked by the parallels between the way in which communism spreads and through Marxism and what I read about the Vietnam War and how the communists in Vietnam executed their policies, retraining everyone and putting people to re-education camps,
Right.
and the same training that they're trying to do with DEI and how they're trying to do that. But it's really just this whole confidence, and they're using the exact same things that we saw happen there on a national level, and the same things that we see in communist China and many, many other communist countries. But I was just wondering if you could kind of walk us through that blueprint of how they use that communist model to use DEI to try and say this is a black versus white person thing, basically, and what that blueprint really looks like and how it actually works on college campuses.
Well, you're taking us into the ideology of DEI, which is, I can tell you, a good way to start this would be to tell you what DEI is not. And then because DEI has two aspects to it. One is front stage and the other is backstage. Front stage DEI is the conversations that we are having every day and see every day, because there's a lot of good people who believe in this. They think that they misunderstand what DEI actually constitutes about history, just providing a level playing field, giving everyone a fair shot. And we hear language that's curated to sound like Enlightenment values, and it dupes many good-hearted people who really believe that this is what DEI is all about. But it's really not what it's all about, because we have laws on the books now that already address all of that. Have had affirmative action for many, many years that was addressing all of that. It's not about populating organizations or universities with the right ethnic dispositions. That's not what DEI is all about. DEI is about an ideology. It's the backstage is the dark heart of DEI. It's a resource extraction strategy. It's again called virtuous victimhood, and it's the idea is to convince innocent people that they are guilty villains who have harmed innocent victims, or people who are, you're complicit in the harm, and they must transfer resources to these victims. Once you can convince, say, a university of this, you're in, and you have hooked the mark for the big con. Now, who is the mark for these DEI functionaries? I call them, the small timers are called peanut grifters in the big con or the con game lingo. They're peanut grifters. They run small resource extraction strategies like fortune tellers, that kind of thing, who are basically telling you a con story, getting you to cough up some money to pay for what you want to hear, that kind of thing. Well, who in their right mind on the university campus would believe in something like this? You ask yourself. These people think that they're the smart folks in our country. These are white liberals on the campuses, faculty and administrators. They are the most vulnerable because they think that they are good people. They're not like the podunks in Oklahoma, the Oklahoma hayseed, or the knuckle-dragging Trump supporter like myself. They're not like that. These people are enlightened. They have critical consciousness. But this makes them vulnerable, because one of the worst things you can say about a white liberal is that you're racist. And they're the target, and they're the most vulnerable, because their charges of white supremacy and racism cut to their very core conception of themselves as good people. They cannot withstand the charge of racism. And it was the death of George Floyd in 2020 that opened the gates to this sort of thing. And the racialists, the DEI ideologists, were saying, look, you white liberals, you're just as guilty. You are guilty as the fiercest Trump supporter. You are complicit in a system of white supremacy. See, this is what was new at the time. There's an entire complex of system of white supremacy and a white racist America. And all of you, regardless of what your political proclivities are, whether you're liberal or conservative, you're all guilty by virtue of your skin color. That's the dark secret of DEI, that it is critical race theory that informs this. And we never see this on the front stage of DEI. This is all backstage. This is what they want to introduce and have introduced onto the college campuses. You ask me how they do it. They run it through re-education types of seminars, thought reform seminars that are very similar, like you mentioned, Vietnam, but also very similar to what's going on in communist China today. The idea that you're not going to destroy your enemy, you're going to re-educate your enemy. And I relayed this milieu management in my previous book, Brutal Minds, about how student affairs has taken over the campus in terms of workshops, in terms of imposing this thought reform program on college students. Well, DEI, it was made for this sort of program. DEI functionaries are not real faculty. These are con men and con women who are poorly educated, who are imbued with ideology, and they come onto the college campuses and they run workshops. And the goal of these workshops is to convince white students that you are guilty of racism, irrespective of your personal story. And it is designed to convince people of color, I'll use their terminology, that they are victims and victims of oppression. It's a two-category system. It is oppressors versus oppressed. It is exploiters versus exploited. It is evil versus good. And this, in their mind, they are good and you and I are evil. And this is what they train our students to believe. They people, Michael Eric Dyson, Ibram Kendi, Robin DiAngelo. Lisa Spanierman is one of the worst, and that's a name that you've never heard, but she appears in the book quite often. And I really want your people I want any listeners here to become familiar with Lisa Spanierman at Arizona State University. She actually runs workshops where she's a social psychologist. The workshops are designed to create a sense of guilt in the minds of male white students so that they can be more easily mobilized to work outside of class for social justice. Now, it's well known you can make anyone feel guilty about anything. And so her ploy is to create this sense of guilt over events that they had nothing to do with, generate this fake guilt, and then mobilize them for work for social justice. How do I know this? Well, she writes about it. She wrote an article about white guilt in the summer of 2020. It appears in a book called Guilt. She's not apologetic for it. I think my personal opinion is that she should be removed from the classroom until the matter be investigated and resolved. But this is how this is done.
Well, and Lance got another question here in a sec about the white supremacy, but Dr. Wrigley, I know you're in a different state than I am, right? But are you tracking what's happening in the state of California on that point? I just didn't want to miss that point. The class, these workshops that you guys have in the university setting is now a required undergrad degree requirement in Section F in the state of California for every undergraduate degree. And the class is called Ethnic Studies. And they have an entire chapter that is indoctrination on Land's next question, which goes to the heart of what you're talking about this. And it's called whiteness. It's literally the chapter. And all of the colleges and CSUs are having trouble getting their Area F courses approved at the chancellor's office because they're submitting them with varied course outlines, ones that more mirror that locality, maybe that rural locality, for example, or they're submitting them with books that are maybe somewhere in the middle, right, that introduce the idea as a concept but don't have it. But it seems like they're only approving the Pearson textbook that has that chapter that really shames people for being a certain ethnicity, namely white people. Have you tracked this at all?
Well, what I track, to give you an idea how I do this research, is I track the journals, what these people are saying. I don't track a particular geographic area, a state, or anything like that. We have a lot of good nonprofits that do that for us. Open the Books is one of those organizations that does this sort of thing. I think it's the American Council of Trustees and Alumni is another one that does this. I am aware of what they're doing at the California universities, however. University of California system is one of the worst. This term you mentioned, whiteness, I have a glossary at the end of my book, DEI Exposed, and this is the last entry of it. I've got entries on white adjacent, white supremacy, whiteness. It's an abstract part of the body of hoax literature that's emerged from this paradigm of paranoia. And whiteness is one of the concepts. It fleshes out a body of prejudiced propaganda. It serves no purpose except to be pejorative and to insulting to people who happen to be of a certain ethnicity. And yet it's propounded and said as a kind of, well, this is our jargon. This actually means something. I think Robin DiAngelo was one of she claims amongst her many other qualifications that she is a scholar of whiteness studies. Believe it or not, there's something called that. What I find in these types of classes is these are ideologically informed. There's not real scholarship. There is absolutely no genuine scholarship on this subject of whiteness or white supremacy. Zero. What you will find are articles that mimic actual journal articles. These are fake cargo cult articles, almost like voodoo, almost like a kind of sympathetic magic, where if you can generate something that looks and sounds kind of like the real thing, then we're going to call that scholarship. And then the peer review process is merely a bunch of pseudo-intellectual types, pseudo-academics, exchanging platitudes and exchanging approval back and forth until a kind of mass a critical mass is established, whereby suddenly they can point to this critical mass and say, look, here is a whole subdiscipline of whiteness studies, and we can draw upon these articles and inform a class. the class that you mentioned. So I'm not surprised that there is a required class in this sort of thing, and that it is being propagated as a required course. This is one of the touchy things, and I think that you understand this as being part of academia, that academic freedom can be both good and bad in terms of its use. It can protect a lot of hoodoo and hokum that runs under the rubric of academic freedom, because you have a lot of hooligans that are actually on the campuses plying their trade. And these are the con men and con women. And they're both in the classroom and in the workshops. So, yeah, I'm familiar with that. And the best that we can do is to publicize what's going on and to inform as many people as we can about the reality of DEI.
Absolutely. Land's got our next question for you. I think we're going to dive a little more deeply into the whiteness concept, and then a couple more questions. Then we're going to head down to the audience. Remember, audience, best question. You're going to get a free copy of Dr. Wrigley's book. Go ahead, Land.
Thanks. It's such an important space, because I've seen even my family members go from common sense to just thinking everything is racist. In DEI Exposed, you talked about the white supremacy culture list that shows up in DEI programs, and it labels things like professionalism, punctuality, individualism, and even the nuclear family as racist. You trace it back to Timu, I'm going to mess this name up probably, Timu Okon in 1999. For people who have never heard of this before, where did that list actually come from, and why is it still being used?
Well, Tim Okun is one of the unsung heroes of the DEI group. She was a diversity person back in the last decade of the last century, 1990s, and she was upset. She came home after a particularly disheartening session of trying to get people to believe that they're racist, and she wrote down 15 qualities or traits that she believed exemplified white supremacy culture. She just wrote them down off the top of her head. And she took that list, and it began to grow and metastasize into her little circle of friends. People would look at it, scratch their chin, and go, hey, that makes sense. Then she expanded this and even acknowledged that it was a fake list that she had simply made up on the spur of the moment, became part of her dissertation. It became part of an online group called Dismantling Racism Works, and it's now been quoted and cited until the extent now it appears on over 50 college campuses. It informs the recruitment of potential doctors at med schools, Duke University's med school, for instance, Boston University, St. John's University. It's everywhere. And and people tend to think that, well, it must be a heavily researched, thoroughly researched concept of white supremacy culture. Well, it's not. It's something that the person made up years ago, and it has simply grown on its own to become this kind of a North Star for a lot of people who want to believe that there is such a thing as white supremacy in behaviors. And really, as you mentioned, these are success behaviors, things like punctuality, professionalism, attention to detail. These are all behaviors that are available to anyone to become a success in a modern industrial information age society. And yet they are disparaged as white supremacy culture. I'll leave it to you to figure out why that would be disparaged. But I can actually read the short passage that Tema Okun acknowledges. She admits that she made it up. She says, here's Tema Okun speaking for herself. I went to some kind of meeting, and I don't remember the details, but I went to a meeting, and it was very frustrating and horrible. I came home, and I sat in front of the computer, and the article literally came through me onto the computer. It was not researched. I didn't sit down and deliberate. It just came through me, end quote. It was like magic, right? And this is what is being propagated on college campuses nationwide. It is a fraud of magnificent proportions, and it ought to be slapped down everywhere it shows up.
That's what gets me. The ideas are ending up in workplaces, schools, trainings, and most people have no idea where it came from or what the foundation really is. This is such an important topic. I cannot stress enough. Even my husband, with what he does with work, he's a district manager. They implemented implemented it into his job, and he's just out of his mind about it. He can't stand it. And it's just a very scary thing. But thank you for that. I cannot stress how important this conversation is. I'm going to kick it off to Fido.
Yeah, we only got two
Yeah.
more questions and then we're going to go to the audience. I see some hands up, believe it or not, on the web, but I don't on my app. So we're glitching out. I wonder if the DEI hires are infiltrating our space. Anyway.
Yeah, we got just a couple more questions, and then we got at least 2 hands so far. So if you want to ask a question, now's your time to come up. We'll let you come up pretty soon after this next couple of questions. And like you said, we got a couple books to give away tonight. So the best questions, we'll send us a DM, and we'll get you a book, and you can read for yourself exactly what Dr. Ridley's talking about. So we talked about how we have all these ideas and thoughts, but then they take this big con and they compare it to the struggle sessions, and they're doing the work. Kurt Levin's re-education model in the book. How does DEI function as thought reform? That it's really trying to train students to this paranoid personality disorder. And so, what's their end goal, Dr. Wrigley?
Well, their end goal is to create a cadre of what's called in the psychology literature a pseudo community of persecutors, because people who are afflicted with paranoid personality disorder are basically see their enemies everywhere. And I think there's an awful lot of this. And I'm no psychologist. The closest I come is my work in self-taught social psychology as an addendum to political science. But there's an awful lot of psychopathy and personality disorder in the DEI space. I'm a member of the American Association, and I'm also a member of the various subgroups that student affairs, et cetera, of folks who are not faculty, but who populate the bureaucracies on the college campuses. So I have a keen appreciation of the psychological profile of folks who are DEI folks, and they are basically paranoid, they are suspicious, and they propagate this ideology that is very similar to what we find in Maoist ideology, in the sense that their techniques are basically pressuring students in these struggle sessions. And it's not beyond the pale to call what goes on the college's campuses as struggle sessions, because students are told that they are either victims or they are villains. They are not allowed to disagree with this, because there are, and I should say I've participated in some of these. There are ground rules that are set for these struggle sessions. One is not disagreeing with it, to accept this type of what they call new information about society. And one of the purposes, and I'll give you an example, Sherry K. Watt is an indoctrinator at the University of Iowa, and she's a psychologist. And her goal is to create intellectual vertigo. And as she tries to dislodge the settled belief system of her students. And this is one of the main goals, is to attack the sense of self, the sense of identity, and to create this, her words, intellectual vertigo, which paves the way for the influx of a new belief system based on critical consciousness, which is a third world Paulo Freirean type of belief system that DEI embraces. And so what we find is actual true indoctrination going on that is modeled on the Soviet and Chinese models of re-education, particularly the Maoist re-education model, where the sense of self and identity is attacked, it is dislodged, and it is replaced. Kurt Lewin is the father of the Encounter Group, and it is his model that the Chinese follow, and it is based on unfreezing a belief system, unfreezing a belief system, changing the belief system, and then refreezing the new belief system. That's the 3-stage model that DEI indoctrinators follow on the college campus. And it's because it's brainwashing. That's and the word brainwashing is not some sort of popular lingo. It's an actual word in terminology. And it's found in the DSM-5, or the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. And there are serious problems that can arise whenever someone undergoes this kind of brainwashing or this type of attack on the sense of self, and the betrayal that students feel toward their parents, people who were supposed to tell them the truth about the social world. And these people that do this sort of thing feel no regret. They feel no compunction about what they do because they are on a mission that is quasi-religious in nature.
You know, Dr. Wrigley, I know exactly what you're talking about. I just went through the goodness forsaken process of interviewing a bunch of folks for a new position at our college, and I'll tell you, it is ingrained in who they are. Every single response was what you would expect to hear from indoctrinated folks. You know, think of every liberal buzzword you can possibly think of with words like intersectionality. Everything, every word that is covered in your book was a part of their response, almost like it's an accepted norm in the culture. Interestingly enough, I don't believe the offer went out to that particular person, but it's nauseating to sit and listen to. I'm a little fed up. So I got one more question, and then I think we'll go to hands. I'm gonna just. I'm sorry because I didn't track them. The space has been buggy, and I'm kind of wondering if it's the CCP or someone else trying to interfere with us. But we're gonna do Liz, then Matt, and then Jim, and that'll be right after this next question. We're gonna hit all you guys, and we're gonna have a broader conversation. But in your book, and I think this really is going to give folks a bit of an appetite to read this. Is you talked about Frederick Douglass, right? And you did this sort of contrast with DEI victimhood between his self-made man speech and its call for this relentless work. I really was hoping just maybe briefly touch upon that contrast for the audience, and then tell us a little bit about like what's the most important takeaway for everyday folks that aren't living and breathing this like you and I are, and not keeping up on this, especially parents who really should demand merit for as much as higher ed costs nowadays and personal responsibility over this ideology. What do you say to them? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm going to ramble a little bit. I'm going to tell you, you brought up Frederick Douglass. I'm a really great fan of Frederick Douglass and his self-made men's speech. What's interesting in the National Museum of African American History, his speech on what to a slave is the 4th of July appears in the museum, but his self-made men's speech, far more popular, does not appear. And I wanted to check that out to ensure that that was indeed the case, because self-made men, he was a believer as an escaped slave in the magical power of work, perspiration versus inspiration. And he was an exemplar of this personal philosophy. And you asked me, what should people understand about these folks? I think that, we have to, gird our loins and arm ourselves against the fact that these folks are committed ideologues. I hesitate to say, well, some of them are, but not all of them are mentally challenged in the sense that there's a pathology involved. There's a commitment, a ferocity, almost a feral commitment to this ideology of DEI, critical race theory, critical consciousness. And this is what motivates them. They believe that this is a world of enemies and friends, and you are the enemy. You are the I'm the part of that pseudo community that they've manufactured of enemies. And they utilize this pseudo community of enemies, and they call it white supremacy, to explain every failure. They externalize every failure, every challenge that they have. And this is the explanation that they find, and that you will find in these indoctrination sessions. This is what you find on the campus. It is a racially motivated, racially imbued society, and nothing else is important in that society. It's a very paranoid way of looking at things, a world of white and black, of no grays, and everything is explained to this very simple dichotomy. Ibram Kendi has been one of those, has fostered this, you're either racist or anti-racist, this dichotomy. It's very primitive. Manichaean ideology. The one thing that I would say that students can arm themselves with, and parents should recognize, that these people come across as good people. I know some of them. They're nice people on a daily basis. They're not ogres. They don't have horns. These are, evil doesn't come marching in saying I'm evil. No, these are very good, and their pitch is very good because they do it every year with regard to indoctrinating things. I should say the chief thing that a student can arm himself or herself with is skepticism, and don't give them your trust. These folks, in all of their indoctrination sessions, are desperate to get your trust, and they want to reduce what they call vulnerability. They want to reduce vulnerability and make you, they want to model vulnerability so that you will give them your trust, and then you will start saying things and opening up about your personal life, which yields these indoctrinators, DEI folks, leverage to attack you. So the lines that they use are, I'm going to model my vulnerability to you. I want you to make yourself vulnerable. I want you to open up. I want you to we're going to create a space for disclosure. That's the worst thing you can possibly do with these people, because they are looking for anything that they can, that they can hang their hat on, that they can attack you with. They're looking for your family's social status, income, what you believe, what kind of religion you have, what your core beliefs are, because they're going to attack those beliefs. That is the chief function of these sessions, these struggle sessions. They're going to attack your belief system and replace it with their own belief system. That's not what they're going to say. They're going to say, we want to create a space where it's safe and you can reveal and you can disclose. I'll give you a game that they like to play. It's called the Privilege Walk. And it's not a real game in terms of competition. It's a revelation game or an interrogation game in which people line up. You line up, and then for every, you'll hear a series of statements, and for every statement, you'll take a step forward or take a step back. And this is designed to reveal the imbalance in society. Well, what you've just done is, by agreeing or disagreeing, you have revealed an awful lot about yourself that you would not disclose in an interrogation or a simple quiz. And so we have to watch those attempts by these people to get information about you that they have no business getting, because they're going to use it against you.
Well, thanks for that. That's all of our questions. So, Fido, I'm going to rely on you for hands. I dropped and came back up, and I see a couple of hands still. I see Liz and Matt. So, and I just don't remember the order there. So, I'm gonna let you wrangle that.
Yep, absolutely. So this is the point where we start letting the audience ask questions. So we just ask that you stay on topic and that you don't have a long soliloquy. It's only supposed to be an hour space. We tend to go a little bit long. We ask very much that you don't use the Lord's name in vain. We are a Christian space. And tonight we have 2 free books to give away. So we're going to try and get to as many questions as we can. So if you want to ask a question, then please come on up. Just let us know, and we'll DM a couple of you after the space. So I think we have Liz first, then Matt, and then I see Bubba. So go ahead, Liz.
Hi, nice to meet you, Fido. I didn't realize you were in Northern Virginia. God bless you. Hi, Iron and Lan. Doctor,
Hi, Liz.
my question for you is, have you felt, since you've written this book or your books, that, I don't know if you have tenure or not, that you have been treated differently by the college because of your speaking out regarding this and the corrections you've made in the mindset of these people who are trying to follow this ideology, for lack of a better term? Because I'm curious, because I want to apply this to my granddaughter, who's just a year older than Fido's daughter. She's 11. She'll be 12 in October. But, I want to get them young.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. And if they weren't clear on my position, then my role as a faculty sponsor of TPUSA on the campus pretty much sealed the deal for me. I have been treated differently, very much differently. I don't get a lot of invitations to go to lunch from certain people, but I get a lot of invitations and people stopping by my office to talk privately about these issues. I do not have tenure. I don't worry about that sort of thing. I'm a teaching professor, full teaching professor. But what they do know, and what most any college is not going to want to have, is publicity, what they would consider bad publicity, and attacking me for my academic stance, because everything I say and do is buttoned up with research that is true, and with 3 different examples of everything I say and do with regard to my books. So they really have no peg to hang their hat on. And at the same time, I think that most anyone who wants to take a stand on this sort of thing has to have the stomach for that sort of thing, and to recognize that these people who are on the other side are not nice people. They're not good people. And trying to become friends with these folks and meet them somewhere halfway is just not going to do it. Many of them are unforgiving. Now, there's a great body of people in the middle, people who are, say, work in physics or engineering or computer science and that sort of thing, who just do their research, teach their classes, and keep their heads down. They're good people. I'm referring to, and I think you're referring to, the folks who we see on the streets at Columbia University and New York University and places like Harvard and Yale demonstrating. We don't have a whole lot of those people, but we have enough to worry about. But they don't ever really bother me. I think that if you are locked down solid on what you know to be true, and you are solid in your faith, I think that would be enough to carry you through. And be willing to shoot me an email and let me know what your situation is, and I'll get involved. Find allies on the college campus, and they'll get involved, because we have some great allies on our side, and they are fearless when it comes to defending the kinds of things that you're referring to.
Well, and I'll tell you, as a tenured faculty member, Dr. Wrigley, I kind of stay clear of it. I do have to work in this as a division chair for our other tenured faculty. And I'll tell you, on the community college campus, it's no different. There's folks that they don't care. They're just going to plug in whatever we're supposed to plug in with default language that we have to spoon feed to them. And then you have the others that take it to the next level. And it's in everything they do. It's in their assignments, right? And it's part of their grading rubrics. And these classes, all the money they're spending is, hey, we're going to do professional development. You're going to earn units, and they pay for it. And then they pay your hourly rate for it. So when we talk about it being a big con and a big, huge funnel of money, it's kind of crazy. So I think we had Bubba and then Matt, Fido?
I think we have Matt and then
Matt,
Bubba,
and
then after you've asked your question tonight, we do have a couple extra people that are trying to come up on stage. So if you drop down, so Matt, go ahead, and then we have Bubba and Ded.
Typically, we wouldn't have to ask you, but we had technical difficulties, and there's only a host and a co, so we don't have that extra seat. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, I don't know what happened to the space tonight. It's just glitching.
Go ahead, Matt.
Ugh. Yeah, but anyway, Dr. Wrigley, it's nice to meet you. First of all, second, when I don't know if anyone else thought of this, but when you mentioned how the academic who came up with that list that you mentioned early on, how it just came to her and she wrote it down, that honestly seemed to like a counterfeit version of a of somebody receiving a word from the Lord. It obviously came from the pit of hell, but
It does seem like that, doesn't it? Yeah.
So that's what stood out to me to over the course of what you said. But also the way I look at this is that these people who push DEI and intersectionality and all these other buzzwords we hear, is they view slavery, specifically the kind that this country experienced in its history, despite being the fourth country to abolish it as an institution, as original sin. And so it seems that they would think that affirmative, for they need a vehicle by which to perpetuate, make it seem like slavery was never abolished as an institution, that racism still exists, even if it doesn't. If it doesn't, they'll just make it up. They'll just conjure it, as any cult would do, and therefore this is a vehicle to keep it going, to make is that a fair assessment here?
I think it's very fair, and I wish I had mentioned this earlier, in the sense that it was Randall Kennedy, a law professor at Harvard, who said back in 2020 that I don't know why these folks are attacking the campuses, because college campuses are the least racist places in America. But unfortunately, they happen to also hold all of the key gatekeepers who are good white people, good white liberals, who are vulnerable to charges of racism and are most likely to accept the burden of being complicit in white supremacy. I think that the problem you mentioned for them is there's just not enough racism on the campuses to keep this kind of thing going and to keep the hierarchy of bureaucracy of DEI on the campuses going. So they've decided to do two things. One is the hate hoax. And I think Wilfred Riley, in his work on hate hoaxes, has been incredibly valuable in this space. We find lots of instances of hate hoaxes. Someone finds a noose somewhere or a swastika somewhere else, and then the campus is in turmoil. There's protests, only to find out that it was one of the DEI types who played a joke and created a hoax to gin up people's awareness. The other main, and this is really key, the other main vehicle is the creation of something called the racial microaggression, and categorizing this as a racial instance on campus. Racial microaggressions is a piece of pseudo scholarship. It's fakery of a grand scale. This is basically making up a racial incidence by saying a minority says, "Hey, I feel like I've been disrespected." Doesn't matter if the person who did this microaggression even knew what they were doing. The only evidence needed for a microaggression is that someone feels aggrieved. And they've begun to count those microaggressions in the racial incidence statistics, and it really skyrocketed the instances, which tells campuses, hey, we've got a terrible racial climate here. We've got to bring in more DEI professionals to help us fix the problem. And so it's a kind of a self-perpetuating circle of vice that the DEI structure has really created. Good question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we got Bubba and then Dead and then Jersey. So go ahead, Bubba.
Thank you, guys. Professor, nice to meet you.
Likewise.
Here's my question for you. With groups like Democratic Socialist of America, BLM, working with the Sao Paulo Forum, the Singram groups, and the Mexican government to push unity and diversity, anti-imperialist rhetoric marrying DEI, equality over merit framework, are they running a Marxist cultural offensive, importing hybrid ideology warfare into American institutions? And how do we counter that with your experience and intelligence?
Well, I think that in the 21st century, the social media and the porous nature of social media has allowed the old models to start to crumple, and the idea that we can exclude these types of foreign influences is now last year's model. Now we have these threats that are multifaceted, that they are based all over the world, and they are backed by high technology in terms of China and Russia. And I think that there is an incredible threat that we have to mobilize. I'm delighted that our intelligence agencies are mobilizing against it, utilizing AI to a good purpose in the sense of being able to protect this nation from these kinds of threats. But foreign money and influence in the universities is a really big problem. We find that the country of Qatar has exerted great influence, great negative influence into our college campuses by providing platforms for radical jihadists to come onto the campuses and to generate unrest, to attack and intimidate, bully, harass Jewish students. We have got to mobilize ourselves, I think, and to make ourselves aware that there is a danger, and to recognize and to connect the dots. This is not some sort of one-off here, a one-off there, isolated instance over there, that this is all really connected. And I do think that the neo-Marxist viewpoint, it's not, a lot of people kind of scoff at that sort of thing, but it has it has traction on the college campuses. There are a lot of Marxists on the college campuses, a lot of Marxists. I'm aware of a number here, and these folks are basically academics but they provide fertile ground for activists to work their way onto the campuses. And we find the Ivy Leagues like Columbia and New York, of course, and New York University, permitting jihadists to have a platform whereby they can generate this kind of unrest. I think it's an unhealthy tendency. I think that more and more awareness of this should be generated in these types of venues, and I think that the word ought to be passed around that this is the kind of thing that is going on. I hate, and I hesitate to use the word, raise awareness, because that's such a cop out. But if I had an answer to what you're asking right here, I would implement that, and I would do so with alacrity. I do what I can, and that's what all that I can ask of any other people, is to do what you can in the venue of influence that you have. And mine happens to be in higher education, and I do what I can.
All right, great. Okay, Dad, I think you're next, and then Jersey.
Gracias. Thanks for letting me speak. Hello, everybody. Doctor,
How are you, Dad?
nice to chat with you again. It's a two. Again, nothing's ever easy with me. I hear people's sphincters puckering. Two-part question. Number one, DEI. Would you say that's a form of wokeness?
Oh yeah, it's at the core of wokeness. Assuming that you and I have the same definition of that, wokeness being a whole phalanx of various movements that all march, I would say, all goose step under the same rubric.
Okay. Question two. So, I'm, and rightfully so, focusing on the left, the woke left. It's almost a, can't think of the term right now. I'm a little bit fried after looking at too many files. It's almost it's like common knowledge, right? Got to go after the left. So with woke being connected with DEI, a little bit of a curveball. I'm super curious, and I've observed the snowball of there was the alt right before, and now it's been called the woke right, the woke Reich, and it's just a snowball, and I see it getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The communism, Marxism, socialism, and the Islamists destroyed the left and destroyed the Democrat Party. They're divided. And knowing what Russia and Qatar and everyone is doing, Alexander Dugin, brilliant, Putin's left hand, right hand man. I'm watching the same thing happen within conservatism, and I'm watching conservatives, now become divided. And I'm super curious with woke being the same as, well, almost the same, basically interchangeable with DEI, a little bit of a curveball. I'm curious if, what your perspectives are and what your views are regarding the woke right.
When you say that, I assume you mean Tucker Carlson candidates Owens, and I can't think of several others who are basically making common cause with our enemies in the Middle East, and are showing a nasty show. Oh, Nick Fuentes, that would be another one. I think that these people they're not really fracturing the conservative movement. I think that they're moving farther to the right, revealing themselves for who they are. These are my personal opinions. I'm not sure exactly what it has to do with DEI, but I don't really want to have any kind of truck with them, because I think they're betraying the ideals of conservatism, the idea of individualism, of free enterprise, of enlightenment ideals, of logic, reason, scientific method, and humane values. And I do not believe that they represent those of them. I think it's unfortunate that they decided to go down that road, but that's the road that they chose.
Maybe they'll have a DEIA, and then they'll add a T for Tucker later on, Dad. So we'll see, I guess, right? But good questions, Dad. I appreciate it, brother.
And then we have Jersey. Yeah, Jersey. And then I think we'll wrap it up after Jersey.
Yep. We did say 1 hour, so we want to definitely be respectful of Dr. Wrigley's time. So go ahead,
Yes.
Jersey.
I will be. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Professor. I really appreciate what you've said. You've made a lot of great sense. I'll try to keep this very brief. It's two questions rolled into one. Do you find it difficult to show students the correlation between the DEI victimhood mentality of oppressor versus oppressed and Marxism? And do they understand the history behind countries throughout, say, our history
that have made that ideology like their primary national policy, like Soviet Union, China? Do students understand that, or do you
Well,
seem to?
that's an interesting question. It has to be understood. My answer will be should be understood in the context of the courses that I teach, which are strategy and competitive advantage, entrepreneurship, and management information technology. So that topic explicitly doesn't really come up except in the notion of a free enterprise system supporting entrepreneurship, where what happens in a socialist society, what happens vis-a-vis a what's called a free market capitalist society in terms of incentives, in terms of business success. And there's been really no problems that I've had in the classroom because I don't talk about these issues. I keep my classes focused on the topics that I'm being paid to teach. That said, if that issue comes up, we talk about the actual track record of socialism with regard to the 20th century, which is a really poor track record. And of course, the usual response is, well, that's really not socialism. It's never really been tried. All of that nonsense, as if the people who were running these socialist societies were somehow dumbasses. I'm sorry, were somehow stupid, and that they are that they were not as knowledgeable as the people we have today. And so by focusing on the economics of a situation rather than the feelings-based ideas of society and equality, we can see profoundly illustrated the failures of socialism. And all we have to do is really look to today's New York and I think it's Seattle, Katie Porter and Zoran Mamdani to see the deleterious effects of socialism in the real world. I think it's a wonderful test case, and were I teaching a class on that, I'd be using Mamdani's policies as an example of what happens with actual cause and effect, and what happens with actual economic system when you make choices that are suboptimal. You get suboptimal outcomes.
Thank you so much for that answer. That makes a lot of sense, and you are correct. We are experiencing real world effects because they both declare themselves socialist.
Yes.
They call themselves socialists, so we're going to see how it works out for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people are going to have to pay a heavy price.
Thanks, Jersey.
Unfortunately.
I always love hearing from you. Dr. Wrigley, I really just want to thank you actually for being here tonight. I really appreciate you and the way you explained such a serious topic in a way that everyone can understand. This is exactly why we do Liberty X, to get to know the person behind the account and have conversations that actually really, really matter. So thank you again for your time and sharing your work with us. That's personally for me. I'm sure everybody could agree. This is one of the most important topics because a lot of people still are blind to what is happening. And we all have someone personal to us, or maybe many people personal to us, that you watch just do a total mind change, and you're like, hello, where are you? What happened to you? So this is so important, and I want to thank you so much. You're a brilliant man. Thank you.
Well, thanks a lot for that compliment. It's a pleasure being here, and I really enjoyed it. I wish you guys luck in the future shows, and I hope to tune in.
And I know Tom wants to, or Fido or Tom is going to.
Fido, closing thoughts,
Yeah.
then Dr. Wrigley, you closing thoughts, and then I'll close us out. And if you'll hang out, Dr. Wrigley, we got a song for you, and we're gonna do a little closeout coming spaces with some of our folks that support us here. All right.
Sure thing. You got some books, audio books for the best questions, and happy to get that information from you and send those on. And I'm looking forward to hearing the last part of your show here.
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Ridley, I just want to say thank you so much. Your book really brought to light what the real truth behind this cancer that's spreading throughout our world, everywhere. So we didn't really get to it today, but it's spreading not just beyond the university setting, and now they're expanding into other education settings that we see here where we live in Fairfax County in Virginia. I posted it in the Purple Pill down there, and we talked about it online briefly, that they're doing these same things to our children at the elementary school level. Where we live in Fairfax County, they've established an equity office, and our local School Council has established this one Fairfax policy that equity is what they value. And they've taken that policy and established these DEI directly the same things. They're establishing trainings, and now they're spending $6 million a year. So we've spent $50 million over the last 10 years in 2014 when they established this. And they've done nothing to actually improve education. So now we have an entire elementary school's worth of teachers, pay wise, at least. And they've done nothing to actually improve the things that were their stated goals, which were to change that achievement gap between Black and Hispanic students and Asian and white students. And I posted the graph that just comes directly from data. And so they've done absolutely nothing to improve those. They've done nothing to actually support those students when they are from a lot of smaller communities, poorer communities in our county, at least. And it's more of a poverty issue and a parents issue and a challenges with their upbringings, at least in my mind, than it is a racial or an ethnic issue. Obviously, there's some language issues with Hispanic students, a lot of them here, and we have other issues that bring that. But I just wanted to thank you for bringing to light these things that they're doing, and it's really just a money grab that we're not going to get this back, and these students aren't going to get this time back. I just want to thank you for exposing this amongst the university setting, and thank you for your faith. We always like to close out with a prayer, and I know one of your favorite verses is really one of my favorite verses as well. Matthew 7:12. In everything, then, do unto others as you would have them do to you, for this is the essence of the law and the prophets. And then you follow that up with an Old Testament verse: an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a hand for a hand, and a foot for a foot, from Exodus 21:24. Well, in that case, Jesus has somewhat circumvented our eye for an eye and tells us that we're supposed to turn our the other cheek to us when someone strikes us in one cheek. But God's justice is real, and that justice will be coming. And we know we want His justice to come to our world, and He will be the ultimate judge of that. So we just thank you for your faith, and thank you for that. And I'll hand it over to Iron for a closing prayer and to close us out and talk about next week.
Well, thank you so much, Fido. Again, Dr. Wrigley, thank you so much for spending a little over an hour with us here. We try to get it to an hour, but we're doing our best here as a young show. But guys, I want you guys to just kind of picture this. We're going to kind of bring that tale from Exodus right into this space. And we had the Israelites that had just escaped centuries of brutal slavery and oppression under the Pharaoh in Egypt. And as a newly freed people, they gathered at Mount Sinai, and God delivered His covenant law to build a society of responsibility and order, not endless victim cycles, the ones we talked about tonight. And in that exact moment is when He declared Dr. Wrigley's favorite verse in the Old Testament, Exodus, which was the eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. And this measured justice, in my mind, guys, stands in direct contrast to this virtuous victimhood. Right? It's biblical, folks. And we exposed this tonight, and Dr. Wrigley's book exposes this, where DEI traps people on this division with these peanut grifters that we talked about, right? This re-education instead of true liberation through our merit. Meritocracy matters, guys, and accountability. So I want to call everybody here to read this book. Grab it on Audible, grab it on Kindle, and arm yourselves. Show up at your school board meetings. If it's a state college, if it's a community college, they have public meetings, and they all have curriculum meetings where you can go and listen in on this and speak out about it. That is something that I think everybody could potentially do. You could even do write-ins for them and do an opposition in that. But in Matthew 7:12, I really think that Jesus crystallized this remedy for us, right? And this call, with this golden rule. And it does directly counter this victimhood and this oppressor binary. So, guys, this isn't just biblical. This is secular intersecting with biblical. And I think that I would like to call you guys all to do that. That's what will continue to try to bring to you every week at Liberty X Happy Hour. And I want to strengthen us as a community to stand for truth. Keep standing for truth, and let's keep raising these voices up like Dr. Stan Wrigley's and their book, because I know he put a lot of time, effort, and energy into this, and he continues to do so. So thanks for all you do, Dr. Wrigley.